Welcome to A Seat at the Table, a series created to give marginalized college students the opportunity to explore critical conversations related to socio-cultural moments. This series is brought to you by the Blaxa, Georgetown University's only Black student-run media publication that aims to serve as a space for students in the diaspora to authentically and unapologetically express themselves. My name is Ryan, and I'm a rising junior studying marketing with a minor in African American Studies, and this year I'm serving as the president for the Blaxa. I'm joined today by 8 NCAA student athletes from Georgetown University gathered at the table to discuss combating racial injustices in collegiate athletics. There's a lot on today's menu, so let's go around and have everyone introduce themselves. Your relationship with the Blaxa, the sports you play, and what you're studying.
Hi, my name is Sarah Kiritan. I am a senior in the SFS studying international politics and minoring in Spanish. Right now, I'm also serving as the co-director of outreach for the Black Student Athlete Coalition.
My name is Chuma Azinge. I'm a sophomore, and I'm majoring in finance and management. I play on the men's basketball team, and I'm currently I coordinate communications with the basketball team for BSAC.
Hi, my name is Maya Drayton. I'm a sophomore. I'm planning to major in marketing and minor in entrepreneurship. I'm on the women's track and field team, and I'm just a member of BSAC.
Hey guys, my name's Daniela. I'm a rising sophomore in the college, planning to major in anthropology. My role is the diversity, equity, and inclusion representative as part of BSAC.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ria Hope Gunn. I am a senior on the men's soccer team. I'm working on a double major in art history and anthropology right now. And I am on the diversity, equity, and inclusion board as well.
What's going on? My name is Joshua Stevens. Um, I'm a junior in the college. I'm a sociology major, and I play football, and I am on the board as well with Danielle and Rio for diversity, equity, inclusion.
Hey everyone, my name is Ahmad Wilson, and I'm a senior in the business school, studying finance and OPM with a minor in computer science. I'm also on the football team with Josh, and I'm a member of the board. I'm the director of funding and BSAC's treasurer.
Hi everyone, I'm Alexis. I'm a junior in the MSB studying marketing and international business with a minor in journalism. I'm on the women's soccer team and I am co-director of communications.
Great, I think that's everybody. So before we get started, I'd just like to take a moment to recognize and acknowledge the current racial reckoning happening in this country due to these state-sponsored killings of Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, George Floyd, and too many others. So for those watching at home, we want to make it known that Breonna Taylor's murderers are still police officers and have not been arrested or charged. And for more information on how to get involved in the fight toward racial justice, please check the resources in our description. So to begin, I want to know from you guys, what are your thoughts and reactions to the various American sports leagues that have returned and the ways that they've addressed or not addressed racial injustice?
I can start. I think the NBA, out of all the leagues, has done a really amazing job at addressing all of these social issues. I mean, you can compare them to the NFL and the MLB, which are kind of starting to, answer and have players reach out about these issues. But the NBA, I think, within the bubble with the social messaging on jerseys and the court has really taken the lead.
Kind of just like to second that, I feel like the NBA has done a pretty good job. But there's always more that they can do. I think maybe a couple of days ago they just took a vote on whether to even continue the season after the recent happenings with Jacob Blake, and like two teams, Lakers and the Clippers, were both for ending it. In support of the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and I feel like that would have been a statement. Everything else is cute, like putting all the names and stuff on the back of the jerseys, but until you really make a move, almost like taking money out of a white man's pocket, essentially, like they're not going to feel any different about the whole movement.
I agree. Yeah, I definitely agree with Chuma on that. I feel like boycotting the games yesterday sent a big statement, but I do kind of wish they would have continued that momentum going forward. One thing I do also recognize is that women's sports, like the WNBA, also boycotted their games. And just for women, like they already get less viewership and they get less money. So the fact that they're willing to risk the minimum money that they're making and the risk that they put themselves in by putting themselves in their own bubble, I think is a big statement just as Black women, and the way we stand up for our community as well.
I think I can speak for the soccer world, at least in the United States. The soccer world is very um, white dominated, I would say. White and Latino, I guess, but mostly white. And I think this year there was the creation of the Black players in the MLS group. Um, and so I think for the soccer world, at least, and hopefully other sports that don't have as many Black athletes, we're seeing more and more people kind of start to speak out about racial injustice within those sports and within the country as well.
For sure. So can I ask you guys, it seems like you mentioned the NBA, the WNBA as leagues at least that are doing really well. I'm curious, they're getting it right. I'm curious to know from you guys who you think is getting it wrong.
For me, I would say what I've noticed with basketball in the NBA for the whole bubble. Everyone took a knee before the game for the anthem. Basketball women, they're wearing shirts. They're really showing solidarity. I think with baseball, I'm getting mixed emotions because you'll see two people kneeling before or for the flag, but then the rest of the team, rest of the players are all standing or they'll kneel before the flag, before the anthem. And I understand that people consider baseball to be America's game, America's sport, mostly white viewership. Uh, so I can understand them not wanting to lose that, but also that what message does that send? Yeah, to the fellow Black players.
I want to mention hockey for one because I saw this one of the few Black players who are in the NHL spoke up about how he didn't really feel support among his teammates, among the league and whatnot, because you know, like all these other teams have been canceling their games and just stopping play, for a little bit at least. The majority of the NHL hasn't really said much or hasn't really reached out to their few Black players or showed support for their Black players. I feel like the NHL is like one of the teams that really isn't, on board as much as these other teams.
That player that you're talking about, Evander Kane, he definitely has been in a compromising position for a very long time, and I noticed that as well. So I want to know from y'all. We now know in August that the coronavirus disproportionately affects the Black community, with reports from McKinsey, for example, showing that Black Americans are almost twice as likely to live in the counties at highest risk of both health and economic disruption. But we also know that according to the NCAA's demographic database, over 50% of D1 basketball players are Black, and the number is pretty much approximately close to 50% for football athletes. So, given these two realities, I'm wondering, how does this conversation around the need for student athletes to return to campus differ from the conversation about regular students returning to campus? And how does it affect or shape the perception of student athletes, do you guys think?
I think it's definitely a big issue. I think COVID has exposed, especially the Power Five conferences, just how important these players are monetarily and economically to these universities, and the exploitation of that. And I think that if universities aren't taking the right steps to protect um, health and safety of these players, then it just shows, how Black athletes are regarded at the university level.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. I think it's pretty deeply rooted in exploitation, and we've seen for a long time, as far as student athletes go, just like in the college scene, like whether that means representation in the classroom as opposed to what they're doing for the sports program, or just like I don't know, just safety. Like in terms of COVID, like I feel like if you can't bring back students safely, how can you bring back your athletes safely? It's almost like they don't care, especially with the number of schools that we've seen already have breakouts with so few people on campus. Like I don't know, it's just you can tell where they're placing their importance.
I think it has a lot to do with, I guess, kind of like the entertainment factor that student athletes bring to schools. They kind of think of us more as not students, but rather than like entertainment, money for the school, and different things like that. So I think they're obviously putting that at a higher pedestal than the safety of the students.
To echo what those three said, I think it kind of echoes what's happening with like the country as a whole. We've seen like Betsy DeVos talk about how she wants students back, and she said, you know, only a small amount of students will get COVID. And I think it's in turn, like Chuma was saying, it's like priorities. It's like you can see they're prioritizing economics over student life and or student athlete life, I guess, and student athlete health.
So just in building off what you just said, Rio, we discussed like the professional leagues, what they're doing, and somewhat on a league-wide basis what the NCAA is doing. But I want to get closer to home and talk about the response at home. And so the treatment that you guys receive as athletes, it's safe to say that all Black, Indigenous, people of color students or people of color who may happen to be Georgetown students or any student at a PWI face discrimination. But I'm wondering, have you guys ever experienced any discrimination or prejudice from your Black peers due to your athletic status? So, for example, have you ever experienced elitism from your classmates or your peers when it regards to in regards to your athletic fit versus your academic fit for Georgetown?
I think we've all heard comments along the lines of like, "Oh my gosh, you go to Georgetown." "Oh yeah, I do go to Georgetown. I play like I run track." "Oh, okay." And it's like they kind of see it as like, "Oh, you only go there because you're playing a sport and not because of my academics."
Personally, like one experience I can remember pretty well was like early on first semester my freshman year, I was in a management course and the teacher told us to pick groups for kind of like a actually I was in a management course with you, Ryan, and our teacher had told us to pick groups essentially for our first project, and I looked to both of my sides, you know, and both the people sitting next to me, white kids, both looked to the opposite side of them, you know, and it was like kind of embarrassing almost because like I was sitting there, I felt like so isolated, but like I completely understood it, you know, like the first thing that comes to your mind as a regular student is like, oh, athlete, like Black kid, you probably won't try if he's in my group, you know, and it's just like a lot of the microaggressions like that, stuff like that that I've experienced.
That reminds me of this one situation that happened my freshman year. Like it was like after the football season, and I think like grade reports came out or whatever, and I was like I got recognized because I was on the dean's list or something. And I was in the training room, and one of the athletic trainers was like, "Wow, who knew you were smart?" And I'm like, I'm at Georgetown University. You know, I'm not just a football player. And I kind of like pushed that in the back of my mind, but like I just realized like how like terrible like that is to say to a student athlete. And I feel like a lot like that's just something that I feel like every one of us has gone through in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I on our team we had a coach tell us one day. I don't even remember what we were talking about, but the thing that stuck out for me was he said, "You're here on an athletic scholarship, like not an academic scholarship." Um, so like sometimes it's from like your own people. It's not just outside forces. It's not just white classmates. It can be Black people in the department, or it can be Black peers on campus too.
I think specific to like the Black peers, I think that we can all acknowledge as student athletes already that like as Black student athletes that like the struggles aren't the same. Like, we're all Black at the end of the day. We're just Black as whatever, like the people that don't play sports. But I think that it's almost like we have to prove ourselves twice. Like we were on like both sides of the like battlefront or whatever the saying is. I don't even know if that's a saying, but I think that already we're here, we're trying to prove, we're trying to like battle like the imposter syndrome. Like we already don't think we belong. At least I felt like that at the beginning. And then now you have to, convince your people too that like, you also got here based on your own merit, not just based off of your like athleticism. So, like Sari just said, like it really do be your own people too. But like, I think that our Black peers can be ignorant to our reality too. And, you can't just group us off, like not trying to like separate us, but in a way when they don't understand us, it's like we're already separating ourselves. So it's like now we're like the battle is not just us against, the white people of the institution. It's like us against everyone. It's like specifically being a Black student athlete. So that's kind of frustrating.
And I totally agree with Daniela about that. She talked about just we have to constantly prove ourselves that that we belong here. That's when I questioned my freshman, do I belong here? My freshman year grades was they weren't hitting like a Moz probably were. But for me, and I know for me, it's funny because I had a meeting today with this teacher. We had to have like a 15-minute little interview thing, and it was kind of weird. But I was like, okay, I'll do it just to introduce myself and things like that, learn more about myself. And I was sitting there, and I was talking whatever, like it was fine, normal business. And I guess she didn't know I was on the football team, and I was like, yeah, on the football team, we have to do this, that, and the third. And she like did a little eye thing, and I said, oh no, I said, I really told her I was on the football team. I'm like, oh no, and now she's gonna think differently of me, and that's like what came to my mind until this. A few hours later, I was thinking about it. I'm like, oh my gosh, did I really just tell this professor that I'm on the football team? And she didn't know. I was before class, and I was chilling. I would had my little hat on, whatever, and I put the Clark Kent glasses on. Became smart Josh, and I had crazy confidence. And no one knew that I was on the football team. And now she knows, and to me that just kind of um I don't know, it spoke volumes of what I still feel and how not just me but other people still feel about being a student athlete. That it's a constant battle of proving yourselves. I mean, Ahmad is a 4.0 student, Dean's List PNC student athlete of the year. Like, he's too humble to say that. But if you just looked at him and someone would say, "Oh, I mean, he's just another athlete," but but it shows that he's had to almost prove himself for 4 years here. Yeah, there's some of us who, and Anya's a sophomore, Maya's a sophomore, um, and they're still early in the process, and so it's just this constant, be trying to be approved is it's really tolling. I would say mentally tolling, and it's hard on us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes like both ways. Like, I think someone mentioned like, when people are surprised that you are smart. I think it was Ahmad who mentioned that. And it's very hard to be like, well, yes, I got into Georgetown on my own merit. Like, for me personally, I wasn't recruited athletically. I walked onto the team. So I kind of had that foundation with not being associated as a student athlete. But, one of the meetings with my coaches before I joined the team, one of the things he was like, "Oh, you'll definitely boost our GPA." And like it's just stuff where he was surprised that that was a factor that I could also bring to the table other than my athletic ability, but it's things like that where just like you question like why is this person surprised that as a Black woman I can be smart and stand out in my classes. So it's definitely, something that takes a toll on you.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that y'all have experienced that as far as like your academic and social environments at Georgetown. But I want to lean into your athleticism and your athletics. So in 2018, the assistant professor of sports management at UConn, he wrote an op-ed discussing a dangerous stereotype that plagues Black athletes. And I'm sure you guys may be familiar with it. But in his op-ed, he writes that this stereotype, which is complex and has many layers, holds that Black male athletes have superior athletic abilities that enable them to excel at high levels in sports such as football. And the stereotype also holds that Black males have a distinct physicality that allows them to endure extreme amounts of pain. This is the same myth, he writes, that was used to justify the enslavement and mistreatment of Black people in America from before the Civil War through today's era of mass incarceration. In fact, he says, a case can be made that there are many parallels between the exploitation of Black student athletes today and how Black labor was exploited during American slavery. So, with all that being said, when it comes to your athletic abilities, do you guys ever feel as though you're held to a different standard or perceived differently on and off the court from your non Black teammates?
Well, I know growing up, I was obviously like raised in a place where I was the minority. I was always like the only Black girl on every single team that I was on. And I when I was younger, people like literally used to tell me that I was only good at stuff because I was Black. Or like you're fast like because you're Black. And like I've heard that so many times. And it's definitely something it's hard, but I think when I came to Georgetown, I definitely had more Black teammates. So I felt more comfortable and I didn't feel in a place where it's like I'm doing well because I am Black, because the people around me that I was mostly around were also Black. But that is a thing, that is real, and that's something that's like a normal stereotype to think that Black people should be better at sports, or like if a white person is, just as good as somebody, they're like, oh my gosh, like he's white. Or some people only say, oh, he's only good because he's Black. That has nothing to do with anything. People don't really see the hard work that goes behind what Black people actually do to be good at a sport.
I would second what Maya said. I also grew up in a pretty white area, and at times, like during my youth career, I would be pretty frustrated because I felt like coaches didn't put in the same time with me as they did to my white peers, just because I was fast and it was just like, oh, go kick the ball to Alexis. She can run through the defenders and score. Like that was it. And so that really frustrated me. And then getting to college, now I'm the only Black person on my team. And it's kind of weird. It's like I almost kind of ingrained that bad stereotype in my head, like, oh, I have to be better because I am the only Black person. So it's like this weird dichotomy there where it's like, I know that's not the truth and you shouldn't view Black athletes in that way, but being the only Black person, it's like, I have to stand out. I can't let people down because I am the only representation.
Well, before we get into the demands that BSAC has, I want to talk about discrimination and oppression in collegiate athletics on an institutional level. So, similar to BSAC, Black athletes across the country are speaking out against the oppressive structures that exist at PWI, such as those in Alabama's gymnastics program that drew national attention recently due to their experiences of overt racism. So, given the structure of NCAA sports, do you all feel like attending an HBCU would alleviate feelings of exploitation and discrimination in athletics?
Personally think not. um, just because I don't know if there's what I personally get from it, like the stereotype that HBCUs aren't necessarily like as good at sports as like PWIs and like those powerhouse schools. So I think they're definitely slept on. So I don't know if that would make it like greater, but it would definitely like I feel like people would end up saying, "Oh, that school is only good because they have all Black people on the team," or like because it is an HBCU. I mean, that's something that could happen, but that's just a possibility.
I think we forget about it's not I don't think it's even known really that, the fact that HBCUs were all powerhouses back in the day. They were they were the best of the best. They were playing against Bama. They were playing against Syracuse, in these, basketball, football, you name the sport. And people forget that these teams were so powerful in turn on the athletic side, academically as well, but on the athletic side. So when I saw the athlete that I forgot his name, he was like a top five, or he was like a five star athlete that committed to an HBCU, and it was national news because why would he waste his time at a HBCU when he could go to whatever school he wanted to? But what he was saying is that he wanted to change tides with, with HBCUs, bring back that past glory that used to be there. And I think a lot of the times institutionally, they want to, flash all this money in your face, give you all these accolades. You can, you'll get this, that, and the third at this school. But when it comes to, going to an HBCU, it's thank you, maker, maker. It's tough because when you go to an HBCU, you're bringing this glory and fame to a majority Black institution, and for some reason I feel like institutionally we don't or they don't want that to happen. They don't want these schools to thrive like they used to. They don't want these great athletes to go to these to go to the HBCUs. I know a lot of athletes are started to go to instead of going to Duke, they were starting to go to SEC schools. And so that they had backlash for that. Why would you go to SEC school when you have the opportunity to go to these big powerhouses? But if we're able to, change tides and follow, maker makers, way in bringing more athletes to HBCUs, I think there could be a big title shift.
I think that I have to like agree with Josh on the aspect that they don't want that to happen. And the fact that the pressure is on the athlete to have to make that decision as opposed to the institution receiving the funds necessary to like be able to build up themselves is kind of like evidence of that. But I think that going to an HBCU, while it might make your individual experience better, I don't think it alleviates the institutional impact that the exploitation has on a Black student athlete. Because the reality is you're still like a part of the NCAA, and there are still rules and regulations in place that don't necessarily allow you the most comfort. I think that's kind of what they talked about a little bit in the article too, the things that you can be exposed to, the risk that you put yourself in, like athletically, just overworking yourself and things like that. So I think an HBCU might alleviate the pressure at like a minimal level, but I do think there are larger factors at play, especially with what Josh mentioned as well.
In my opinion, I think it could create a tidal wave, like just like Josh was saying, but it's going to take a lot of time because, like, essentially right now, how college sports are kind of structured, I guess, is like you want to put yourself in the position where you can forward yourself as an athlete, right? And put yourself in front of all the people that you can, get the biggest spotlight so that you can go ahead and do whatever you want to do with the sports. And like at this current moment, like it's tough. Say I was a 5-star prospect, right? Every school in the country wanted me. I could go here, I could go here, I could go here. And with those three schools, like, everybody's gonna see me play every night I play. And I know I'm gonna have the attention because the scouts are already there. Whereas I could try and make a statement myself and go to a school like what Mocker did. And I feel like it's just very, very hard, especially if you're not that 5-star athlete who already has his own platform, to be able to say like I want to go ahead and do this in the short term, just because you don't know how exactly that's going to pan out for you. Um, when you have your name made, that's when you have the ability to make a statement like that. But it can just be really tough for athletes in the short term. Is all I can really say about it.
So I feel like we've hit the experiences that you guys and many other Black student athletes face at PWIs, for better or for worse. And so I want to get into what y'all are doing to change it and push change and demand for long-lasting systemic change at Georgetown. So before we get into the specific demands that y'all have created, I'm curious to know that when you formed the coalition, what was the response from your teammates and athletic staff, your coaches and trainers?
For me personally, coming from like a majority Black team, the response was more positive than not. Um, I did feel like my coaching staff were positive, but I have mixed feelings about it because I think while they were exuding positivity about it and being supportive, I think everyone was supportive in words and things like that. But I think it was the actions that really kind of speak more. We did have trouble with that, getting actions to kind of back those words. And even now, as we still kind of move forward and working on it, that's been the biggest area where we've struggled.
I can speak for, I guess, the track team. I think our coaches personally, they took it very well. They even went like um, the extra mile to create like a group of like some of the like African American like leaders like kind of in our teams, and they just asked us basically what we wanted and what we wanted for the team, and they were being very receptive, and we would have Zoom meetings and things like that. Um, just because they wanted to make us feel comfortable as a team. So I think it definitely varied by coach. And there were some coaches who didn't really do anything, but we did get a lot of positive feedback from coaches. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there will be action taking place.
Yeah, I definitely think that it helped that we had, a meeting with all the coaches and staff within the athletic department. After that, that's when we started to get a lot more responses. But I do think before, in the beginning stages of our group, it was very team by team based. I had to, reach out to my team. Being the only Black person, like no one was really talking about it, so I had to break the ice. Whereas, like Sari mentioned in Maya, there's other teams where, you know, when there's more representation, it's taken in a different way. So I definitely think we still have a lot of work to do in terms of, getting coaches to really be accountable for the words that they say, in those vulnerable moments. But I think we've definitely gotten some good momentum so far.
Alexis, to build off what you just said, in many, if not all D1 NCAA schools, everybody knows there exists a hierarchy within athletics. So, for example, football may have more financial resources and social clout than other non revenue generating sports. So, when it came to implementing systemic changes within Georgetown's athletic department, Was it harder to get certain programs involved, and were there some teams more accepting of being a part of BSAC than others?
I think the obvious problem that arises when you ask that question is like teams with black players, specifically teams with majority black players or equal black players versus teams without or minority black players. Um, and I think, I mean, so far, to be honest, like I've seen some decent responses from some teams with no black players, like the lacrosse teams and the rowing teams or something like that, trying to reach out and wanting to, do have conversations with us and do stuff about, um, you know, uh, racial awareness within their own teams and everything. But I definitely think there's a difference when it comes to, say one of the lacrosse teams at our school versus the football team, in terms of kind of like how they're going about things, the conversations they're having.
I think that's hard for everybody, that question, really. Just how do you reach people who can't necessarily relate? Like Ria was saying that there's no black players on certain teams. You know, how do you reach them? How do you push them a little more to get them on the same, on the same way, on the same side as you almost? Because I think that's a hard issue. That's a hard, dichotomy of relatability between, black athletes and majority white sports, at least at Georgetown, that is.
To build off that, Josh, I want to know from all of y'all, especially the board members, is there a push to have more athletes from certain sports a part of BSAC, and what does that look like? Making sure that every single sport is represented within the coalition.
I think it's definitely harder, obviously over Zoom, and we started everything like when we were all remote and home and everything, so it's harder to get people involved. Um, but I think a good thing for our school, I guess, because you mentioned earlier, like a lot of revenue generating, like sports, like basketball, football at certain schools. Like for example, ours is kind of like the men's basketball team that's like revenue generating for us. So I think one of our main things is to try to get men's basketball involved and people within that sport to be involved, just because they have just a bigger audience and more people would kind of listen to them and be more receptive to them and would be able to reach more people. So I think that was one of the main things that we were kind of focused on.
Chuma, for you being on the basketball team, one of the biggest, if not the biggest team at Georgetown, what was it like, the response on your team when all of this happened?
For our team specifically, I feel like our makeup is more so built to be able to respond to this type of thing. And it was pretty easy, just like with the majority black coaching staff and pretty much all the players on our team this coming year being black, like just to really feel what's going on, to be able to understand like the things that we've been going on through our or we've been experiencing through our entire lives, And as far as like making a difference, our team, our coaches essentially like have a big platform already with Patrick Ewing being who he is. Um, and a lot of the times they feel like they should just take things into their own hands as coaches. Um, and I think Coach Ewing actually put out a video, pretty similar to the time that BSAC put out their video, and that got a lot of views. But I think as the players, we also have a pretty large platform, and we haven't been doing a good enough job using that. And I think with BSAC, we can going forward do a lot more. I know that our coaches have proposed that we make a video kind of promoting using your ability to vote and kind of make a change doing that. But I know there's just like a lot more that we could do as a basketball team, especially being like, the biggest platform in Georgetown.
Yeah, and on the flip side, Rio, I want to know from you. So, for those sports without majority Black players, how can they go about allyship in a way that's more impactful? For example, I know the soccer team is doing a lot right now. What would you say to other teams like lacrosse who are in a similar situation?
For the sports without majority black players or without that many black players in general, I think there's a different kind of starting point. I think the overall goal is the same, but I think for minority black sports teams at Georgetown, at least, I would say like the starting point is like the education piece, making sure you know your history, your real history, making sure you're educating yourself, making sure everybody on the team is educating themselves, and that's what we're doing with my team, and I hope other minority black teams are doing something similar. But I think, yeah, I would start there, and then you can kind of go from there in terms of what the next steps are. But I definitely think the education piece is crucial for non or minority Black teams at Georgetown.
For all of you, before we wrap up, I want you to walk me through how you decided on your list of demands. So there's approximately 30 of them, and they span three categories. So tell me, how did you go about prioritizing your concerns while also taking a holistic approach to change the system? And which is the hardest to accomplish, recruitment, sponsorship, or integration?
I think the list kind of started out with just us talking about how we were feeling after George Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder, and just having conversations about our experience. We have a great advisor, Whitney Maddox, who really was helpful with that. And just kind of, as an outsider looking in, I think she helped us really see the parts that were missing from our experience. Like a lot of the stuff that we had normalized, like things that we talked about earlier, just like microaggressions and like the story that Ahmad mentioned about how he didn't even think about what that trainer said to him. Like when we shared that kind of stuff with her, she was like taken aback. And I think that's when we were like, oh, like, okay, like this kind of sucks. Like we kind of knew it, but I don't think we were as conscious of it. Like we were more focused on like our day-to-day activities. So from there, I think it just came from addressing our needs, like Alexis and Rio, who come from teams where, where Alexis is the only one and Rio is like one of four. And then saying, okay, so recruitment's a problem. From the mental health aspect, like we had other athletes come forward and be like, I didn't feel comfortable going to see Dr. Force because she's a white woman. I don't think she can address my problems. And then we saw that was an issue. So it was kind of just step by step. And then after like, we kind of got them organized, that's when it really became like prioritization and like seeing where we could add it. And, we had a lot of help in separating out the categories.
So I'm specifically curious about the increasing Black student athlete representation in all sports. So why does this matter to you guys in the grand scheme of things? And it's particularly notable that it's the first recruitment as a category, it's the first demand. So was that intentional? What do you guys think about recruitment in regards to integration? And that's for anyone to take, really.
I think recruitment is really crucial. I mean, if you look at the competition for a lot of our sports, a lot of the other schools that we try to athletically compete against do a much better job at recruiting these athletes. And you can see, like, it's a simple concept. Diversity, helps your performance in whatever way you look at it. And so, and I definitely think that's going to be the hardest category to hit because you can't necessarily, implement quotas or stuff like that. So it really has to be an intentional, idea and of coaches to really go out there and find that talent because, for my team, the teams we lost to, like, frankly, were more diverse than we are and had, different elements to bring to the table. And I think it's just simple to see, that by expanding your horizons in that area, you can really not only help your team, but, be to the level of the competition that you want to be nationally.
I think in terms of reaching specific goals or demands, rather, I think the hardest, like you just pointed out, Lex and Ryan, I think the hardest is definitely going to be not only recruitment, but also the hiring of more Black staff, because that was another big one on our list. And I think for me at least, that's one of the biggest, those two, because when you have more people who look like you within a community, you feel safer and you feel more comfortable and you feel more respected and more seen and more heard. And I think, um, I don't know, I think in terms of community, I say that community, it starts, like, everything starts within the community. Like if you have a position, a role within a community, then you can kind of do whatever you're going to do from there. And I think we definitely need more Black student athletes, and we definitely need more Black staff that, you know, we're talking about, like, psychology or not psychology. We're talking about Dr. Force, and but she's white, so maybe Black psychiatrist, is that the right word? Yeah. Black psychiatrist, where Black student athletes can go and talk to them about problems they're having that they can maybe relate to a little more, and that kind of thing. So I definitely think those are some of the bigger goals, some of the more long-term ones, but definitely ones we're keying in on, focusing on, and looking forward to reaching.
Before we wrap up, I want to know from every single one of you, all 8 of you, How do you hope that this list will contribute to lasting racial change for Black student athletes, and also by extension, the larger Black student body?
Well, for me, the biggest thing that I saw in this and that I see in this, hopefully coming in the future, near future, long term future, for certain things, to really bridge gaps between communities. It's enough to say that just it could just be between football and lacrosse, bridging that community, football and basketball, bridging that community. That could be between Black student athletes and, like you said, the general Black student body, the student body. But it doesn't have to be just at Georgetown. This could be expanded towards towards Howard, towards the Northeast community, Anacostia community, the GWAU community. It doesn't just have to be between us as right here, right now. This is maybe where it's starting, but it doesn't have to end here. We're able to bridge gaps between different communities, be more as a whole rather than just different universities and colleges in DC, but come together as a whole somehow.
Yeah, personally, I agree with Josh a lot. Long term, I don't even think there should be a need for a Black student athlete coalition. I think that the more effort we put in now, the closer we get to just being united, like all together, and that's what I want to see long term.
I definitely agree with the whole community aspect of it. I think it's not just about, like the list of demands. I think that's just what kind of brought us together. And it's just a form of allowing people to see that they have resources. They're not alone, like Lexi being the only Black one on the soccer team. Like it's not, she has other student athletes that she can go to and talk to and things like that. It's not just within her team. Like we're all kind of together.
Yeah, going off what Maya said, like my hope is that there aren't any other Black student athletes that come and feel isolated. And even if they are one on their team, that they have a community that they can fall back on. And I just think, and also, going back to what Josh said, moving Georgetown away from just being that white school on the hill, expanding into the DC community, because this was the chocolate city at one point. So just integrating into there more would be great for me.
One of the main reasons why, we made this group, why we had this list of demands was because we felt like, some administrations, some coaches, where there's like not that large majority Black representation on respective teams, didn't really know how to react and help their student athletes feel more comfortable, at Georgetown, at this PWI, when, there's all this unrest with the murders of, Black people every other week. And I just felt like this like in the future, there'll be a point where there'll be enough, like, there'll be enough representation, there'll be enough community to where all these people feel comfortable, all these Black people feel, safe, feel at home at this PWI. So that's just how I felt about that.
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what everybody's kind of said before. I think at this moment and for the next couple of years, at least, my hopes for BSAC are just to create a community for Black student athletes at Georgetown, incoming and current. I think, we're still at a school where it's 7% Black kids. The athletics department's even worse. There's something like 150 of us out of 700. So I think, a safe space where, like I said before, you feel seen, you feel heard, your experiences are validated, all that kind of stuff. I think at least for now and for the next couple of years, when we're working on kind of recruiting more Black student athletes and staff, I think that's really important.
I'm about to be really redundant, but I really just do want to echo everything everyone's saying. So I have to, I don't really consider myself as like an activist or whatever the title is nowadays. And I feel like the only thing that like changed between before and now is that like people are listening. Rio had kept mentioning this in all of our meetings. Like it's not because Black Lives Matter all of a sudden, like people are starting to post about it. I think it's like where we're all forced to listen. Like the world is literally forced to pay attention. You can't ignore it. Like it's in your face. You can't go anywhere. Like it is right here. So I think that we have one chance of getting it. Like I think this is probably the best chance that we have at getting it right. So yeah, people are listening, and I'm really like hopeful that we can take advantage of this situation, even though like it feels like the world is in fucking shambles. Pardon my like language, but like I think that there's a reality in which you can also take that such a tragedy and all these things that are happening and turn it into something good. And I think that's what we're doing. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I also feel like this whole experience is about empowerment too. I think in sports there's a really strict hierarchy, and oftentimes you don't feel comfortable advocating for yourself. And in that way, I think sports can be like a microcosm for like Black people's situation in society in general. Like a lot of times it can be hard to feel like you can advocate for yourself because you feel like you have to give a little here to get a little there. And that means compromising yourself sometimes, especially when you're in white spaces. So I think for us, like we want to empower ourselves, but more importantly, we want to empower like the next group of freshmen that come in. So like Chuma said, like there doesn't need to be like a BSAC, they can just have their own place and they can feel comfortable in that. And they can challenge the systems that are in front of them and know that they have a community at their back. So, yeah, I think that's what I want from it. And I think that's what we all want from it.
Well, thank y'all so much. The work y'all are doing is powerful, it's important, it's impactful, it's needed. And I appreciate you guys so much. For more information on the Blaxa, visit theblaxa.com and follow us on Instagram at theblaxagu. Thank you all for watching, and be sure to let us know your thoughts on this topic in the comments. Also, feel free to suggest what other conversations you'd like for us to tackle at the table in the future. To check out more about the Black Student Athlete Coalition at Georgetown, go on Instagram and follow at GUBSAC, GUBSAC. Thank y'all for tuning in, and see you next time.